Testing, testing, 1, 2.
Oops. Let's go ahead and let's call the November 2024 meeting of the Falls Church Planning Commission to order. Mr. Trey, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Friedlander?
Here.
Mr. Krasner?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Ms. Comont?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Hyra?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, full slate. We have a pretty straightforward agenda tonight, one action item and a couple of work session items and regular slate of information items. So can we get a motion to adopt the agenda?
Mr. Chair, weren't there a few, wasn't there an addition, late breaking
Going to
addition?
get to that, and
Oh, okay.
we're going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're not going to get to the agenda now. All right, well, then I will move it as prepared.
Okay, it's moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, speakers here, we don't have anybody today. Number 5, receipt of petitions. Mr. Tran, do we have any written correspondence?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we received 2 pieces of written correspondence for the Planning Commission. Jean Gresco and Joseph Sharizzi both wrote in regarding accessory dwellings. And I've not received any other speaker slips for this meeting.
Saw those in the materials. Item 5B, receipt of in-person petitions. Do we have anybody here to speak on items on the agenda?
I've not received any speaker slips.
Do we have anybody here who wants to speak on any items? We have one action item today and then some work session items, so if you wanted to speak, now is the time. Nope. Any speakers here tonight? Looks like we have one.
Thank you, Chairman Fuentes and members of the Planning Commission.
Is your mic on? Is your mic on?
Thank you, yes. Good evening, Chair Fuentes and members of the Planning Commission. My name's Wyatt Shields. I'm the city manager, and I wanted to be here tonight out of respect for Paul Stoddard, and this is his last meeting with the Planning Commission. It's something that we all here in the city are taking as a big loss for us. We're very happy for Paul with his moving to exciting opportunities with the city of Alexandria. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to be here with Paul for this last meeting. I'm joined by Deputy City Manager Andy Young, who's here as well, along with our planning staff. And Paul has meant so much to the progress of the city. He has led very important conversations for this community about how we want to change, how we want to evolve as a community as we go forward. And Paul has really special skills, I think, in working with the community and helping community with those conversations. I've learned personally so much from Paul, and I've enjoyed working with Paul. Working with Paul, as you know, is always upbeat. He's always has new ideas. He has fresh ways of looking at things, and he has given me and given all of us energy to do our job and to do our important work together every day. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Wyatt. That's you've touched on all the things that I got into planning to do in the first place, right? I didn't come to planning as a first career. I came to it as a second career. I think, as folks know, that I enjoyed intellectually what I was doing when I was doing defense research, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be working directly with communities. And I remember the day before I started my internship with the city, there was a loud meeting, right? People caring very loudly about the PED bike plan over in the community center. And people came up to me afterwards and they said, are you still going to show up for your internship? And I said, absolutely, right? In a place where people care. And they give up their evenings to come in and weigh in on a plan, to make a plan better, that's exactly where I want to be in my planning profession. And so I've always enjoyed those conversations in Falls Church. And like you said, Wyatt, trying to help a community figure out where it wants to go. And then once it makes that decision, putting resources in place to make that happen, to deliver those back for the community that wants them so much. So thank you all for the opportunity to do what I've done here over the last 12 years.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I think every time Paul speaks, we always learn something and get a good perspective on things. I did want to also note a few other things. In addition, Paul is here with us tonight. Jim Snyder, Paul's predecessor, has also announced that he plans to retire. And this is not quite as surprising as Paul's announcement, because Jim has been relaying to us his plans to retire for quite some time. And Jim, as Air Planning Director before Paul, and as our Community Planning and Economic Development Services leader for the city, has been an incredibly visionary leader for the city, for the community, and for city staff. And so we wish Jim well and his transition as well, but we have more time for that. Jim plans to retire in 2025 in January, so we'll have additional opportunities to celebrate him. I did want to share with the Planning Commission that we have asked Gary Fuller, who is here in the room, to serve as our planning director in the interim period, and Gary has stepped forward to take on that leadership role, and we're very excited about that and very grateful to Gary for his leadership during this time. And Gary has worked with the city for 35 years and has an incredible record here with the city, has seen so much progress here in the city. A graduate of the University of Virginia's School of Urban Planning, and brings just great expertise and capacity. So, Gary, thank you. That's what I wanted to report on tonight, and I've asked for the Planning Commission's support as we get through this transition, and I want to thank all of you all for your leadership and for your helping us get through with staff, and with Jack and Jeff and the whole team, and to serve the community as we go forward. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions of me.
Any questions from any commissioners? I think our work is not yet done on this, too, so thank you, Mr. Shields, for that. We're going to move into the action items, and as we do, I would like someone to make a motion that we amend the agenda so that we can consider a resolution of appreciation for Mr. Paul Stoddard, AICP Director of Planning, Planning Division, Department of Community Planning and Economic Development Services. Do we have a motion move to amend the agenda to add that action item?
I move we amend the agenda to add that action item.
Seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Stevens. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so let's move on to item 6, action items. We have this resolution.
Mr. Chair,
Stevens, what do you got?
in light of how much Paul means to all of us here on the commission, I'd like to propose a resolution of appreciation for Mr. Paul Stoddard. Whereas the City of Falls Church Planning Commission does hereby express its deepest gratitude to Paul Stoddard for his 12 years of service to the City of Falls Church Planning Division and City residents from May 2012 through November 2024. And whereas Mr. Stoddard began his planning career in 2012 as an intern at the city and advanced to the position of the planning director role in 2018, which he has served for over 6 years. And whereas under Mr. Stoddard's enthusiastic and successful leadership, the Planning Division has guided the long-term future development of the City of Falls Church through numerous small area plans, zoning ordinance text amendments, comprehensive plan chapter updates, and new development projects. And whereas Mr. Stoddard has been an exceptional advocate for the city, for good planning and community participation in important land use and site redevelopment decisions, including various complex mixed-use projects and transportation initiatives, positively impacting the future of the city and community. And whereas Mr. Stoddard has provided steady professional guidance and leadership to the Planning Commission, City Council, and Planning Division, along with a strong understanding of issues relating to strategic redevelopment, progressive city planning, community involvement, and a key understanding of the development process. And whereas, although he worked in the little city, Mr. Stoddard made no little plans. And through his tireless efforts, support, and leadership, he has been integral to the Planning Commission, City Council, and Planning Division staff in enhancing and improving the city of Falls Church. And now, therefore, be it hereby resolved that the City of Falls Church Planning Commission, with heartfelt thanks and appreciation of his dedicated work, valued service, and support to the Planning Commission, hereby presents Mr. Stoddard, AICP Director of Planning, this resolution of appreciation on the 20th day of November, 2024.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. Anybody have any comments on the resolution? Comment? Let's comment. Then we'll go.
No, you go first.
I'll make a comment. Yeah, I just wanted to express again my gratitude for Mr. Stoddard. During when I was chairman during the pandemic, I really actually looked forward to our weekly meetings and phone calls, and I enjoyed, as you folks know, I'm a city planner as well, and I enjoyed talking to Paul. I mean, Paul is he's a consummate professional. He's the kind of a preeminent planning nerd in the best sense of that word. His enthusiasm for the profession and for what planners do is infectious. And, even for myself, I enjoyed, like listening to what Paul had in mind and just, kind of sometimes sitting back in awe of what he was able to do with a relatively small staff. He built an amazing kind of planning operation here. And, as somebody who's seen a lot of small jurisdictions, I mean, Paul should be very proud of what he's accomplished here, and the city was very lucky to have him for the time that we did. And so I will miss you, Paul. I know you're going to go on to bigger and better things, but I really enjoyed working with you during your time here.
Go on.
Paul is a big part of the reason why I'm up here today. In 2013, I submitted a traffic calming request for my street, and Paul was the very first person I talked to about that request, and he got me hooked on this whole city volunteering business, and I was on the CACT for many years, chaired that, and then came over here to Planning Commission in 2021, and Paul has been there throughout my whole personal journey in my civic engagement with my local community, and I'm so grateful for that because he is just such a tremendous leader. He's so knowledgeable, he's so generous with his time, and I love his positivity, his creativity, but also like his practicality. Like he has big things, but then he figures out, okay, how am I actually going to get this done? And that's like a really rare combination. I think there are a lot of people that have big ideas, but they don't actually get things done, and Paul does both. So I just want to also give a personal thank you to Paul for bringing me here, and we're going to miss you so much.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The meeting that Paul refers to with the Bike Ped Master Plan, and 12 years ago, he understates. It was not just loud, it was, pitchforks and effigies material. I remember we were all jammed into the rec department, the rec room over at the community center, just cheek to jowl. I mean, people, waving their finger in the faces of folks who didn't see eye to eye. And I think that was a healthy dialogue. No one actually was injured. And I think it did set the tone for the past 12 years of some frank and open and difficult discussions as the city changes. But in all those conversations, what was most impressive about Paul was the ability to, and the interest in, and the enthusiasm for hearing what other people's views are. Politics is a great business if you just, ram through what you think and off you go. But the real secret is being able to take a room that has some strong differences of opinion and manage the meeting in a way that makes everyone feel that they've been heard, and if they didn't persuade, it wasn't for the lack of, an opportunity to do so, to make their case. And I think it's great. I'm sorry to lose Paul, of course, like everybody here is, but I think it's great to take his skills to a bigger stage, and I hope someday that maybe across the river there in Washington, some of the talents that he brings to municipal planning will find its way up to the federal level and be an example for the folks in Congress. So thank you very much, Paul, and good luck to you. Just want to say one word about Gary, who, gosh, has it really been 35 years, Gary? I was chair of the CACT, I think, when Gary was the first staffer, or second staffer maybe, who staffed that committee for me. So I thank you for stepping in, stepping up, and wish you the best of luck. We have lots of work to do. The table's set for, a very exciting year ahead next year. And I wish you and your staff all the best in accomplishing what we need to for our little city, where we do indeed make no small plans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duncan. I associate myself with my colleagues' comments. Again, Paul, thank you for everything. As was said, you're a consummate professional. I really appreciated your ability to include all voices, as Mr. Duncan said. Learned a lot from you on community involvement, engagement, and making sure everybody's voices were heard and respected. So I really appreciate that. Again, just learned an awful lot from you. So thank you. Thank you for all that. And agreed with Mr. Duncan. Gary, thank you for stepping up. This is, I really appreciate filling that void this time. And UVA planning graduate here as well, so we have that in common. And just one word, Mr. Snyder, I think I ran into him initially around planning around the Roslyn-Ballston corridor. It was a long, long time ago. And that's clearly a national model for how to do that kind of development right. So, among the three of you, clearly have left the city, the region, and I would say the Commonwealth of Virginia in a much better place than you found it. So thank you all very much for everything. Do we need a vote on this resolution?
I think so.
Yeah, formally. Yeah.
Do we need a second? I don't know.
think we need a
We have a second.
Do we have a second? I'm sorry, I
think so.
messed up.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Comont. Ms. Comont, roll call vote? So
Yep.
we can get it on the record?
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Friedlander,
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Krasner,
It's an enthusiastic eye.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Emphatically, yes.
Mr. Hyra,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Could I,
Anybody else want to speak on this item?
could I indulge a photo? Have Paul come up in the center of the dais? Maybe you guys could stand up?
We can do that.
Couldn't let you go without embarrassing you a little bit, Paul.
Can we go down? Yeah.
All right.
Just lucky to be here.
Okay, back to the fun stuff. Item 6A, Planning Commission minutes, last minute. Comments, questions on the previous meeting minutes? Ms. Freelander.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on line 151, I just wanted to state for the record that I wanted the regulation updates to restrict short-term rental use, as it'll be a change in the fabric of our residential communities. And that was it. Oh,
As being a change
Restrict short-term rental use. Is it, just add the word restrict before short-term.
Okay.
As it will be a change to the fabric of our residential. Yeah, there you go. As it will be a change to the fabric of our residential community. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other edits?
I had one small change at the end, line 208. We did not adjourn at 9:45. I think it was 11:40.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's true. Good
Yes.
catch. You got to get credit for all that extra time.
Absolutely, it's correct the record.
Good catch. Speaking of that, yeah, we got inflation, you know, it's going with our salary.
Any other edits or comments on the minutes? We have a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Move to approve the minutes as revised.
Second?
Mr. Duncan,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Coman, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved. Let's move on to our work session items, number 7, 7A on 821 West Broad, the Econo-Size Closet Site Plan. Mr. Stoddard?
Thank you, Chair and members of the commission. I'm happy to introduce this item briefly before I turn it over to our case planner, Mr. Hollern. And then the applicant is also in attendance tonight, and so they'd also be available to provide a presentation of the project proposal before it goes back to you all for questions and discussion. So starting at line 5 of the report, the request, as I said, is for you all to hold a work session on this application. The item, sorry for not reading that out at the beginning, this is site plan application munis number 2024-0569. This is your first work session on this item. In terms of staff recommendation, beginning on line 10, staff has completed the initial review of the application. As always, reviewed this for consistency with the city's comprehensive plan, small area plans, relevant development regulations and ordinances. The detailed staff comments, as always, are attached. Beginning at line 17 is where staff has highlighted several things for suggesting for your focused conversation tonight. First is around waivers, which of course you all are asked to approve as part of a site plan application. First is noting that additional narratives are needed to explain and justify those waiver requests. And then the second is a request to see accompanying materials, including a transportation demand management plan and parking management plan, be attached to the request for a parking reduction of approximately 65% from what's otherwise required under city code. In terms of site design, staff is looking to see some changes to the reorganization of the layout of the sidewalk materials and the sidewalk landscaping. Some additional information around building heights, and then other requests for clarification on technical comments, some questions around stormwater and ADA compliance. I'm going to skip over the remainder of the staff report until I get to the timing section. Just to reiterate, timing there is on 294. Just to reiterate that this is your first work session on the item. The application was received in early October, and that future review would be pending a resubmittal by the applicant, after which we'd expect to bring it back to the commission 30 to 45 days after receipt of that resubmittal. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hollern for his presentation, which I may have stolen a portion of.
You did.
But I'll turn it over to him.
So get ready to hear that stuff again. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jeff Holland with the Planning staff. Tonight, the Planning Commission is requested to hold an initial work session on a site plan application for the proposed Econized Closet Showroom and Office. This application proposes to demolish an existing two-story vacant building at 821 West Broad Street, most recently used as a doctor's office, and to construct a four-story Econized closet totaling 15,600 square feet in size. The 1/3 acre site is located at the southeast corner of West Broad Street and Spring Street, and it is split zoned B1 and R1A. Several waivers of site plan requirements have been requested by the applicant for landscape buffers and interior parking lot landscaping, although staff has identified others in regards to a parking reduction and vehicular circulation that the applicant will need to formally request in a future resubmission. In the first review of the application materials, staff has asked for clarification on several topics, such as waivers, building height and materials, and pre- and post-development stormwater calculations. In addition, staff has suggested a reorganization of some streetscape and landscaping elements to bring the project more in line with similar developments along the Broad Street corridor. Lines 106 to 225 includes all of staff's analysis of the proposed application against the comprehensive plan, West Broad Street Small Area Plan, zoning code, and streetscape standards. In summary, staff finds that the proposed application will help towards achieving many of the goals outlined in those plans, specifically those that encourage a well-designed and walkable transition between commercial and residential districts. Beginning on line 231, we have laid out both the requested and identified waivers and parking analysis for this current iteration of the site plan application. Several of the waivers listed on the site plan's cover sheet were either not clear, not necessary, or require some form of narrative justification. A parking reduction of 65%, while not formally requested in the first submittal, will require a transportation demand management plan as part of a future submission. It is also worth noting that the Planning Commission has the authority to waive or modify landscaping and buffer requirements and may also attach conditions to any of those approved waivers. At the bottom of the report, as Paul had mentioned, we have a brief tentative schedule for the site plan that's laid out for your reference. There has not been any public comment so far on this project. And that is it for the staff report. We do have a few members of the applicant team here. We do have architect Zach Gasper and property owner Noel Sweeney. There may be a few online as well, and I'm not really sure if anyone joined online, but that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have comments from the applicant at this time, or? Nope.
I think they do have a presentation. Jack, if you'd like to pull that up for them.
Let's do that, and then we'll turn to.
Sure.
Is there a way for me to control a presentation, or is he just going to go through it?
He'll just do it.
Okay. Sounds good. Actually, you can go up to the front, that page for now. Thanks. Well, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. Thank you, Planning Commission, for taking the time out of your days to listen to our presentation. And I just wanted to say thank you, Paul. We didn't get much of a chance to work together in your time at Falls Church City, but you did help me find the conference room earlier today, so thank you for that. We are working with Noel Sweeney, who's to my left right here. He's the owner of Econize Closets, which is a custom closet manufacturer based currently in Falls Church. They are right over on Park Avenue. Noel and Econize have outgrown their current space over on Park Avenue, and they would like to, they've bought a piece of property on Spring and Broad Street, and they would like to build a new headquarters and showroom there that gives them a lot more square footage, and also is a place that really promotes their brand. And we're hopeful that this design and development will do that. So my name's Zach Gasper. I am an architect with Greenspur. My partner, Mark Turner, he's not here today, but he's a longtime Falls Church resident. He lives right down the street from this project. Like I said, Econize Closets has been in Falls Church for 12 years. I personally grew up in Arlington County, but have been coming to Falls Church all my life. So this project really hits home for us. It's something we're really excited about, and it's something that we're excited about working on the Planning Commission with. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So we like to, come up with a mission statement before the start of every one of our projects. So for this one, we want to do a boutique development for Econize Closets. They're a well-established firm in Falls Church that's going to serve as their new headquarters, which allows them to retain business in Falls Church City. The design that we're going for invokes an old but modernized brick mercantile store. And it creates a pedestrian-friendly streetscape and hopefully preserves the little city feel of Falls Church that we all know and love. This is just a quick site plan, location plan showing you where we're located. So right there on South Spring Street and Broad Street, we're the corner lot right across from St. James Catholic School, which is actually where my partner's 3 kids went to school. Next slide, please. This is the existing conditions. You can see it's sort of overgrown right now. There is an existing 2-story structure there as well. There's also parking behind the structure, the sort of U-shaped turnoff. Next slide, please. So this is our site layout. You can see, we want to promote this pedestrian and sort of bikeable scale of Falls Church. So we've located the building tight to Broad Street, pretty much as tight as we can, and we've gone ahead and hid the parking in the rear portion of the site, similar to what's there already, but expanded it a little bit. As you can see, it's a very, very small, narrow site. We also chosen to create a perimeter of trees that surround the building and the parking lot, in hope that it'll sort of soften the hardscape there and landscape, and also create a nice walking path for the sidewalk that's going to wrap around the corner as well. We're proposing having a walk-in to the first floor of the building off of Broad Street, and the site sort of slopes off down Spring Street towards the back where the parking lot is. So there'd actually be another entrance to the basement or ground floor off of the parking lot as well. Next slide, please. You may have seen it in the rendering on the cover page. Here's some more elevations of the design that we're utilizing. Going with some sort of white brick or stucco or concrete, but something that gives that warehouse feel, and contrasting that white siding against some black windows to give it that steel window look that you see often in old warehouse buildings that we think will help it aesthetically tie in with the rest of the older buildings in Falls Church. You can see we also implemented a step facade at the 3rd story just to break up the scale of the building a little bit and make the scale at street level a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Let's see here. The building also faces south and west, which allows a lot of natural light to come into it. Also allows a lot of visibility from the street, so people can see in and see the showroom of Noel's really nice cabinets that he designs and fabricates. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, it's a really tight site. You can see here, it's 57 feet wide, so parking is definitely going to be an issue. As Jeff mentioned too, we're going to be requesting a waiver for the parking. So by our calculations, based on the 15,000 square feet, we need about 30 parking spots. What we've found is we're probably able to provide around 11. So that's about 60-65% reduction. We are providing a loading space as required, and there's currently 2 means of egress and 1 means of egress as well. So the site, we went through a pretty extensive parking study on this site. What we found, the width at 57 feet just doesn't allow for parking on both sides of the drive aisle, which significantly hinders our ability to get more parking spots on this site. The minimum required depth for parking stall in a 90-degree layout is 18 feet. So and the minimum 2-way drive aisle is 23 feet. So you add up 18 feet, 23 feet, 18 feet, and you're already at 59 feet, which is wider than our whole lot is. Not to mention that also wouldn't leave any room for a loading area or a landscape buffer that we need. Let's see. We do think that this site is justified, though, in going for a reduced amount of parking spots. The square footage of the building is quite large, but a lot of it is going to be used as a showroom for Noel, which means that he's only going to have, 1-2 employees working there at most times, showing around 1 to 2 clients at any given time. So there's going to be a lot of spaces dedicated to displays. The Broad Street corridor too, we're right there on Route 7. That provides other options for parking and public transportation. And this area also is very pedestrian and bike friendly. We're 2 blocks away from the WNOD. So some of the office space that we're proposing in the ground floor of the building, we're hopeful will be rented out to people in the neighborhood and surrounding areas that could easily commute by bike or walking. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. Yeah, the green button.
It's getting colder. It's the
There we
cold
go.
front.
So these are some of the waivers we're requesting. As Jeff said, I think some of the waivers that we actually need to obtain may have not been on our initial submittal. We're excited to work with the Planning Commission and staff and just to figure out exactly, what we need to do to obtain the design and layout that we're currently showing. So next slide, please. This is just a quick summary sort of showing where some of the waivers are that we were currently requesting. We need to maintain a landscape buffer all the way around the parking lot, which we currently adjoin a residential district on one side of the property and another business district on the other. So we're proposing and asking to get rid of the landscape buffer that would be adjoining the business district, and we also are asking for a reduction in the landscape buffer as well that goes around the property. The site's a little odd. It's, as mentioned, it's part business, and then you can see this line right there. It actually splits into R1A, so the back part of it is residentially zoned. And there's a 100-foot requirement that driveway entrances need to be from R1A zones. So you can see we have one of our driveway entrances is pretty tight to that rear property line, and the other one is starts about 95 feet away. So both of those we'd be requesting a waiver for. Another waiver we're requesting is for the planting island that's required in a parking lot. So it looks like the size of island we would need for the size of parking lot we have would be 162 square foot planting island. We have provided a planting island there. It's only 36 square feet, but it also, adding that planting island reduces the number of parking spots we can provide. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there, but we do like the greenery that it introduces to the parking lot. Next slide, please. So, with that, I just want to sort of restate, we're here as friends of Knowles, friends and clients of Knowles, to really help them find a solution to stay in Falls Church. Noel really enjoys being here, but ultimately, this project needs to work for him financially and from a design standpoint. And so we're, looking forward to a conversation with you all and with staff in order to figure out how we can achieve that goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Go ahead.
Chairman, fellow board members, thanks for your time this evening. I just want to say a quick couple of words. So I came out to America in '97, and I've been working for a company called C.J. Coakley for 8 years, so Falls Church is very close to my heart. I've been here from the beginning. We opened up over on Park Avenue down the road here at 703 and 705 Park Avenue. I just wanted to be clear that our intentions for this project are to probably change the Park Avenue projects to another Madison Homes or a townhouse development and take the funds from that project. We invested well in the land and reinvested back into Falls Church City, into this property. So thereby, this is not just one development that would happen. It's basically, 3 developments. so to speak. So we're looking at 2/2s, which is allowed by right down the road here from your recent T1 zoning changes. So significant property tax increases for Falls Church City as a result of this project. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So also, I just appreciate your time on this, and we look forward to working along with you and hopefully getting this through. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a work session item, so we're not taking any comments, but we'll go ahead and just turn it over to the commissioners for their comments and their questions. I agree with what the applicant said. I mean, it's good to retain the business here in the city. It's the Spring Street site is it's a tough one right now. Obviously, not doing very much, and I think this is very consistent with our goals in the comp plan. So I appreciate just as some initial comments there. But let me turn it over to my fellow commissioners for comments or questions. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I can start us out. I'm very pleased to see a local business that has been here for a while and thinks enough of the city to want to reinvest. So I think that's a very positive statement on your part. Ideally, what I'd like to see for the next, whether it's a work session or just a regular session, is that we work out agreement between staff and the applicant on all the waivers so that there's no question about that. My guess is you'll find the commission, fairly reasonable in terms of dealing with those, but it makes us nervous when we don't feel like we've got everything in front of us that has to be decided upon. So TDM requirement, that sounds kind of big and scary, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could just be something that indicates, to us, or to me in my case, what you're doing to try to keep it from being just 100% automobile access. So especially, I didn't see it on what was presented to us this evening, but something that you could do as far as bike parking to encourage that, I think would certainly help out towards a TDM. As far as the waivers go, with the 10-foot buffer and so forth and the 5% interior, I feel like I can be fairly flexible on that. I think good architecture and good landscaping can go a long way to overcome whatever people had in mind when they established the need for a 10-foot buffer and 5% interior parking lot landscaping. That was probably done 40, 50 years ago, I suspect. You'll be falling under the state building code, I think, given that it's by right. But I would certainly like to see anything you can do that would help on the energy side. So, for example, if you could include an EV charger, I think that'll actually help your business, given the trend that we see in terms of the number of EV ownership in the city. Also, anything that you can do to accommodate solar. The shape of the building suggests that it might be very useful up on that roof to do that. So again, that's not anything we require, but would certainly be very appreciated. So that's all I have at this point.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Other questions? Mr. Krasner.
We're going in particular order. Actually, I had a couple questions first for staff before the applicant. This lot is split zoned, right? So, I mean, and I know it was probably buried somewhere in there. What does the ordinance say about having a parking lot in R1A?
Yeah.
Is it permitted just by right? You can have a commercial parking lot in the back of the R1A with no screening, no buffering?
So within R1A districts, the surface parking is a permissible accessory use. If there's a sort of a right, it can't be the principal use on an R1A lot, but it can be an accessory use to something else that's going on the property. So surface parking is allowed. And then there are sort of two things in play. One is there's a landscaping buffer requirement between zoning districts when you're going from a B to an R district. There's also a landscaping buffering requirement around surface parking lots.
Right.
When staff looked at the first, I'll take the latter one first, which is the the landscaping buffer around the parking, and you can see that that's provided for in the plan there. And then the other is that landscaping buffer between zoning districts. And rather than try to read that as a requirement for someone to have a landscaping buffer within their own site, instead we read that as the requirement is to have that landscaping buffer to the adjoining property. And so we read that really as an overlapping requirement to make sure they do have that buffer where the project
Has
site.
staff expressed an opinion on the waiver of the width of the buffer in that, again, adjacent to the single-family detached house on Spring Street?
Yep.
Has staff, I mean, I don't know, it's in there listed as a waiver request. I don't know if staff, I mean, ultimately, the commission will decide, but if staff, maybe it's too early. Has staff developed an opinion on?
It's too early.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's something, yeah, I'll just say from the outset, that's a big concern for me. There's a single-family detached house, that right now has a buffer of, I think the back of that site is kind of undeveloped. I don't know. And right now the parking lot's like half the size. And so I get it, but I think there's some concern there. And there's a bioretention facility that's shown, which would limit the ability to plant much, even in that small area that you have. So to me, that's a concern. But I guess before we even get to that point, and then I'll go back to the applicant. The square footage here, maybe you could walk us through the program of the building. It's a large building. I mean, I know what Econize has today. Is this all a headquarters for this? You mentioned like leasing out office space to tenants. And I wasn't sure, is this all for Econize, or is it you're looking to just lease out commercial office space?
No, there would, be office tenants on the ground floor. And we're exploring an option for a co-working up on the third floor of the building as well.
Yeah, and the reason I am asking the question about that, because it gets into I think the justification for the parking reduction, because, there's a difference between, kind of your site. I mean, I'm a little familiar with the business now. I doesn't seem like you attract large numbers of the public, to come visit the site today, other than maybe staff who work there. But if you start leasing out office space, I mean, you're going to, have workers who, and I know it's great to talk about other options, but, the reality is if there's not sufficient parking on the site, they're going to immediately spill over onto the residential, area of Spring Street, and kind of shift that burden on there, as opposed to, there are other parts of town where, I don't have anything against on-street parking and looking at parking reductions where, you're in the more commercial parts of town, but where you'd be shifting any excess, down the street, in the R1A district. It does raise some concern that the site may be underparked, which just calls into question the ability to justify 4,400 square feet of office space on this site, given the constraints that you looked at. So that's like big picture, but, so I'd like to know, I mean, you didn't submit a floor plan. I know you mentioned like some of the space is like showroom space, so it'd be interesting to see a breakdown of actual office space versus showroom.
Yeah, so Mr. Krasner, just to answer your question, we have a Plan B on this as well, which will probably interest you on this topic, which is basically similar, getting rid of the top level and just doing what you see on the first two floors there, and not doing the co-working space, and then doing a ground floor retail with an upper level mezzanine, which would be for my staff. And then maybe just use the basement, so get rid of that top level. So that would probably address your concern on that, and that's something we might do as well. And just to let you know, current usage right now, we have one person in the showroom who takes calls, and we usually take, 2 people in at a time. So our usage is very, very, very.
Right, that's what I was going to say, right.
For the Econize portion.
Yes, the Econize,
For the Econize.
there, and it doesn't seem like it's very, very busy. And so, when we're looking at parking reduction, those are the kind of things that I think we need to, at least I need to factor in, is thinking about, what the demand would actually be. There are a lot of businesses that, could, I think, rightfully justify a reduction because our ordinance would, require way more than they need. And I know in general, the commission is favorable on looking at being flexible, with parking, but it just seems like, this is a significant reduction, a 2/3 reduction. And so, just.
So I think what might be helpful, on our next submission, we clearly show you what the building's going to look like. We'll talk about it internally. We just had a Plan A and a Plan B to this point, but I hear what you're talking about, and I totally
I'm not saying I'm
understand
against the
that.
co-working idea. I mean, all those ideas sound interesting, and I'm not trying to, stifle any kind of creativity at this phase, but it does have to work. I mean, we're working on a very
No,
small
sure.
site, and, you know, you have a hard edge to single-family, you know, detached. Like right now, you're across the street from single-family, but you know, you have Park Avenue is kind of, you do have more of a mix of uses. And here, because the driveway and the access, you can't park on Broad, so people would naturally, you know, just start parking down the street on Spring. I guess you could park in front of St. James and cross the street, but,
One
so,
more thing I'd also suggest, if you get time, just to take a look at what's happening right now. So you'll notice at 703 Park, you'll probably see one or two cars behind there when we're using them. And then at 705 Park, just to be clear, there are cars parked in there, they're full. That's because we're currently leasing that to the Kensington, because they had a parking issue, so we've allowed them to come over there. So just in case you happen to go behind our buildings now, everything at 705 Park right now is not ours. We're leasing that out to help with the parking flow problem for a neighbor. So you want to look at 703 Park if you're actually passing by. It might help a little
okay.
bit.
No, I appreciate all that, so yeah, I mean.
You got it.
I mean, yeah, I understand, you know, you're still refining the ideas here, but I guess for me, if I could distill it down, my big concern would be that buffer. It's one thing to reduce the buffer width a little bit, but it's another thing then to not be able to plant, and some, you know, your stormwater folks will have to confirm. Typically, when there's a bioretention, some type of facility underground, you can't really plant trees there that provide a screen. Sometimes you can. I mean, it depends on exactly what's being installed. I see you're showing like a tree on there, but it's very thin, and I think, you know, we do want to be sensitive to the fact that, you know, this is going to be a very big change to that property. Right now, you know, while they border this property today, the back half has been undeveloped for decades, I suppose. So, you know, I want to be sensitive to introducing like an asphalt parking lot condition as their immediate neighbor, you know, when the ordinance does call for a buffer. So I think I'd take that waiver, you know, pretty seriously when I'm looking, you know, trying to evaluate that. So it's something, as you're looking at ways to maybe, you know, provide more in the back there, that's something, at least for me, that's a priority.
Would it help if we did some fencing in there? Would that help the situation a little bit?
Barriers can help. I mean, there are different approaches, a combination of a barrier and plantings. I mean, there's all different things that can be looked at, and I'm not saying me personally wouldn't consider any reduction of this. It's a 20-foot width, is that right, Steph? And they're at, what are they showing now?
10 feet minimum. You can see
10,
it sort of
yeah.
fluctuates, but the shortest is 10 feet.
Right, so down to 10, and maybe not even, you know, not being able to plant much in that 10. So to me, yeah, you're going to need to look at ways to beef that up, at least that'd be my recommendation, so that, you know, you're not introducing a real negative impact to that property immediately to the south. So anyhow, but like those are my kind of big picture concerns. I know there's some other waivers you're asking for, but in like the sort of in the ranking of priorities is obviously I think it's the parking and that rear buffer that are the biggest concerns for me. And just making sure it works. Like I said, I'm open to be flexible on parking, but we have to make sure it's actually going to work. And not just kind of use wishful thinking and sort of like, you know, we wish people would be multimodal. Yeah, we all wish that, but the reality is a large number of folks, if they're renting office space, may not be living in the city, and they may not take the bus, and they may drive. So we just need to think about then what would happen, and it's just on this site, there's just introduces a chance for a negative impact, and so on neighbors, and just thinking about that, so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, just one thing to add to that. It is a tough site, obviously. We already are at 50% of the lot is covered in a parking lot. It's just, but we certainly can take a look into to figuring out how we
Same
can
thing goes
more
for
of a
that,
buffer.
the double driveways, like if you're looking to tighten things up, I mean, you know, like maybe you don't need double driveways on this for a small parking lot. You
Yeah,
know?
that was only to actually be able to get a truck in there to the loading space. That was really sort of the.
And so that's a great
only way to
example,
do it.
like, you know, waiving the loading space, because like you probably get infrequent deliveries, and a truck can temporarily maybe load, you know, on Spring adjacent to your site. You know, it's just, there are things like that that maybe are a better trade-off. You know, obviously there's trade-offs on a small site always, but, you know, that may be something where, you know, a loading space maybe isn't that important, you know, in trading off for something else that you could get in exchange for that. It's just all things to think about.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, because I totally agree. We aren't wedded to that second entrance curb
Okay.
cut by any means. So yeah, we definitely can study that some. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Freelander.
So, thank you. Thank you for bringing this project to us. I'm glad that you made the statement about, you know, that you're local, you're staying local, you're investing into the community. I think those are all very important characteristics and features that we are looking for. And I appreciate the design of it. I think it's nice to see some transparency along the sidewalk. I do share a lot of the same concerns about parking, especially I do like the idea of having that workspace, that you're bringing other people into the mix on a daily basis. But I think it is a delicate balance of the square footage to the requirements. Something that I did notice too is that there are bike racks shown, and I wonder if maybe moving those closer to the building but toward the property line that is shared with the business side, that might, by relocating those, it might give you some relief to get a little bit more of a buffer on the other side. If you slide everything down to kind of accommodate that, or slide it the other way. I don't know. I think there's some definitely some more studies that would be helpful in that regard. I support staff's recommendations on shifting the landscaping and the sidewalk and flip-flopping those so that we're closer to our sidewalk standards and that the sidewalk is now buffered from the street traffic. I was curious too, that little teeny planting area that's in the middle of those parking spots, is there a way to make that a little bit larger so it can support some tree canopy, just to provide a little bit of shade too, because that is going to be a heat island in that parking area as well. So anything that we can do to kind of get some relief of that as well might be helpful. I appreciate all the details that you put into like the trash enclosure, all of those little details. I'm curious, the trash enclosure, is that just concrete and that's facing the sidewalk?
Yes, I believe right now it'd be like a painted cinder block or some sort of steel enclosure, and it would have doors on it as well on the driveway side, drive aisle side.
Maybe some attention to that for a more pedestrian experience along there so that it's a little bit more friendly and not kind of back of the house right up against the sidewalk. I did have some other questions about the lower level entry that kind of runs parallel to South Spring Street. That foundation wall, how deep is that? Because you have like a little opening. It shows on C005 if you have it available in the presentation. There's like a cross section that kind of shows that foundation wall and that walkway into the building. My concern is only about safety of that area at night. It's kind of a great little hideout if it's too dark, but also you don't want to overlight it. So there's, how you're treating that in terms of safety of the occupants as well as safety of the people on the sidewalk walking by as well at night would be helpful to think about as well.
Sure.
So-
Yeah. That was designed in order to get light into that natural light into the basement there. But yeah, we can certainly discuss the security of it a little bit more because you're definitely right. We don't want people down there that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you did with that slot of space to get the light in there. I think that's a great way to do it. I just think about the safety of it a little bit more in your development. And I think that was it. I did have a question in terms of how much larger is this showroom compared to what is on Park, so that we can kind of get an idea. Are we doubling the size of it, or are we doubling the size, like your overall office space? Because I think that also kind of gives us an idea if we're walking by what's there currently, to have an idea, is this going to be
Yeah,
okay?
so the buildings over on Park, I want to say 703 is maybe 2,400 square feet. And then 705 is probably the same. That's inclusive of the basements. To be honest with you, we just have a couple of staff in 705. 703 is mostly what we use. So we normally need like 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet. So the base ground floor level is 4,000 square feet in this new building.
Yeah.
And then actually on our Plan B alternate, our second level is half that, and it's a mezzanine at 2,000 square feet for staff.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the Plan B was 6,000 square feet, not inclusive of the basement level.
Okay,
So, and 6,000 is probably, we need 4,000 for a retail showroom,
Right.
and then we need at least 2,000 for staff. So 6 is probably the minimum we need on
Okay.
our Plan B, not what you see here. So it's
So almost like
basically
a
getting.
third more.
Sorry, it's getting rid of the, there'll be a roof, but it'll be a walkout roof. It's getting rid of that top section, and it's reducing the size of that second level to a mezzanine. So the new Plan B would be for, what you will see is 4,000 and 2,000 square feet, plus the basement. So we're probably going to end up showing you another plan that's going to reduce this from 15,500 square feet down to 11,000 square feet. So it'll be a third. It'll be a third down, probably.
I got you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
And I'd like to echo somebody's comments about the roof and some roof garden or, solar. I think those are really great ideas. Again, we can't require them, but because this is it's by right. But I am supportive of some of the relief on waivers that we talked about with regards to the loading area and parking. If we can shake out the numbers, I think that would be great. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I do think of those comments about the roof. I mean, we'll certainly try that. Sometimes it's, when you're building a building like this, it looks pretty nice. Things get a little cost prohibitive, but we are an eco-friendly company. All the products we sell are eco-friendly. So, it goes with the model. So if we can do it, we'll do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that roof is definitely set up for solar in the future. It's got, great solar exposure and orientation, so,
It does, and there's no really tall trees.
yeah.
So it's great. And I'd like to thank you for bringing this forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Como?
Sure, I'll go. So I guess I just start by saying that outgrowing your space is a really great problem to have. So I'm very glad to hear that we have such a successful small business in the city. I really love the look of the building. I love all the glass and the transparency into the building. I hope it helps you sell lots of product. It's really very attractive. It sounds like it's still a little uncertain exactly whether we'll get building A or building B and even the mix of uses, so it's hard to kind of give some more specific comments, but I guess I would align with the other commissioners who have, advocated for increasing that rear landscape buffer for the neighboring residential property. In general, on parking, I would hate for parking to stand in the way of a really terrific new development and added commercial space in the city. So I'd really love to figure out a way that we can make that work. I think you've heard a few different small suggestions for some things that you could change here. I might add one more. If you can go back to that plan, Jack. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sounded like maybe we could be flexible on the loading space, so maybe you can squeeze in 2 spots there and remove that spot next to tree A at the back corner and the rear entrance, and then you could widen the buffer some that way. So just one idea. I think you'll have to kind of Jenga things a little bit with the parking area that you have. But in general, I'm very supportive of this reinvention of this property, and I hope we can see it in the near future.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of comments. I mean, I just had one suggestion about the parking. And you said you didn't know if you were going to go with building A, which you've presented to us, versus B, which will be reduced in terms of its size, so it might not need as much parking. But if you stay with A, I mean, you do have Founders, which is very close by, and I doubt they are utilizing all of their parking. So you could maybe pick up by leasing or purchasing some parking in Founders to get closer to the parking requirements so that you could do your building A and get it passed. So that's just my only addition and suggestion. Thanks.
That's a good idea, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the most exciting element of this proposal is what you started with at the very beginning on the potential for 703 and 705 to become, your next project in town. That would influence my thinking about, trying to encourage what you're doing here. Since you are very sophisticated in your knowledge of land use here in Falls Church, and you do have 12 years under your belt, I remember going to your ribbon cutting too. I'm just curious, while we're all here, for an explanation as to why not try to absorb the property next door to this one as well. You'll recall there was a proposal 10 or so years ago to do a condominium and office combo development by taking that extra lot. What's your market testing shown you about the economic potential for that?
You mean to purchase 819 next door to this one?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's, honestly, I'm not a big fan of partnerships. I like doing stuff on my own. So that would involve a partnership with somebody else or a significant investment. I mean, we paid about $1.5 million for this site, so it'd be at least that for the second site and then a double the size building. So it's, it changes from a $5 million development then to a $12 million development, and it's a totally different animal. And we really are a small company. We're not a franchise. We're privately owned. So this site fits our model well. And anything bigger is too big, frankly, for us. And it just involves other people getting involved, so.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
I have looked at the
appreciate it.
plans where that was in previously, a couple of years ago. So I have seen with Tradition Homes, I believe.
Yeah.
I've looked at that already, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your answer to that. I'm asking mostly because I think we'll get some questions from the community about, the narrowness, and we're trying to squeeze a lot into a narrow space, and it's a small city, and sometimes that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be more willing to squeeze things in. So that's helpful to have that response. The specifics of the proposal itself, I guess I would say, again, given the sensitivity of the folks on Spring Street, the residential neighborhood right below you, it would be helpful to know, the kind of hours of operation that you're talking about. Is this a, operation that's going to be mostly 9 to 5? Is it a...
Yes, sir, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's a family-owned business, so we don't advocate Sunday hours or evening hours.
I think that's-
So usually my sales guys are home by 4. And the showroom stays open to 5, and then we will have Saturday hours because that's the best time for people to come in that are not working, clients. So it'll be Saturday, nothing on Sunday, and 8 to 5, probably.
Yeah, I think that's helpful information also, at least from my perspective. And similarly,
We're also Catholic, so I'll get shot down if I do that on a Sunday.
strictly separation of church and state here, so. Hey, go across the river for that other stuff. The business of the loading dock and how much space is dedicated to it is important also. I mean, are we talking about this being the kind of business where, 3 days a week, there's going to be a truck delivering, making beep noises, backing up and so forth? Or is it, are the deliveries less frequent and less disruptive?
Yeah, so Mr. Duncan, we have a warehouse out in Markham, Virginia, where, so there's two parts of our business. One is marketing and sales. This is the marketing and sales and showroom center, where clients can come in and look at the products, and we can do designs in the showroom. There's no products arriving to this facility except for setting up the showroom initially. And then we ship everything out of Markham. Most of our staff are out in Warren County and Fauquier County and Loudoun, and they travel in. So they go to a 10,000 square foot warehouse out there. We'll be doing no warehousing at this facility, strictly showroom and retail only,
Okay.
and
I think
office. Yeah.
That's also helpful information, I think, to know. As to the buffer on the backside, others here are much more expert than I am on green buffers and so forth. I will note that the old bank building, the physical and smoothie building down the street from you, has a very tight, bump into the neighbors next to it, and there is a fence that blocks lights of the cars that are parked there and so forth. I mean, it is possible to squeeze in, an extra couple of parking spaces if that reduction that you're asking for just seems a bridge too far. And given the neighbors' objections to the Tradition Homes proposal, which I think had one entrance on the very back side, is it possible you could just do without the two entrances and make do with just the one that's closer up to Broad Street? I think that might also give a greater sense of buffer to the neighborhood without, cutting into your parking space too much. But obviously, the parking lot would need to still work, and the trucks would need to get in and out. But if it's as you described, that should be less of a problem. You're not talking about bringing trucks in there a lot and parking on the street. Those are problems, I think, for the local, for the neighbors who are going to be near and close to you. I think that's about all that I would have. I'm glad to see you bring this forward, and I look forward to seeing.
Thanks, Mr.
2.0 or whatever we're calling it, B, option B.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Duncan. I mean, to be honest with you, we like hitting problems up pretty quickly, so it's highly likely you'll see option B on the next submission. It's highly likely we'll be reducing the square footage from at 15,000 to 11,000. And when I look at this loading space, actually, I think it's a little big. I think we can get another couple of parking spots out here. So I think with the reduction of the building size and maybe some configuring on the back parking lot, we can get to a good middle ground on this.
Oh, sorry, one other thing. Your renderings do show two nice big mature trees to the side and behind, I think, the building that you're proposing to build. I mean, that's nice, but is that really going to be the case? I mean, there is pretty good
could you throw
removal of trees is generally required from when you're doing this kind of development on this spot.
Yeah,
So
and we have a tree, tree planting plan and removal. There are a couple trees, obviously, that are on the neighbor's property that are going to stay there. I do think, that big one right to the left probably is on our property and not going to make it.
Yeah, let's just be honest, folks, right up front, that, that's a nice tree. Maybe you'll plant a small tree that 25, 30 years from now will look like that, but in the current span, it's not going to look like that. And that's just important to convey to people that we're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes.
It's a tight site, for sure.
Yeah, exactly, because of all the things we've discussed.
I believe on the tree clearing plan, we just had a waiver signed from the neighbor. There's two trees on the perimeter at the back of the building that are overhanging onto our site that we have to move for the development.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think most of them are going to have, the existing ones are going to have to go, right, Zach?
Yeah, I believe there's one tree on our site that we're saving, and that's more on the southwest corner.
Again, just being, there's a community meeting on Sunday where someone expressed about something completely different, about tree canopy, about that topic, where someone expressed, frustration that when houses are torn down and replaced with bigger houses, why do all the trees have to be cut down, Isn't there something you can do about that? And my understanding of that is, no, there's not a whole lot we can do about it if otherwise you're meeting the standards. But in this instance, because it is a tight spot, just make clear that you show what it is that it's really going to look like. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duncan. I agree with a lot of the comments. I do like the creativity, and I appreciate the problem solving in real time here. This is a good collaborative work session. And I also agree, I would hate to see the parking become a really big problem here, something that we can't figure out. I think with the next submission, we could probably recalculate and figure out what works, but I would hate to see that be a big barrier to this. And I also agree with the comment about flipping the landscaping, with the sidewalk. It's a very hostile area right now for pedestrians. I think it can be a massive improvement to that space if we can figure out a creative way to flip the buffer and really make a nice improvement there. So, but other than that, I agree with most of everything else that's been said. So, any other comments from commissioners here? Any additional questions or anything?
I have one more. Just a quick comment. I do want to say I appreciate the perspectives and showing the surrounding context. I think it helps us see all those other buildings. It's very, you'd be surprised, it's rare that we get to see the actual, what it's going to look like with what's there right now. So thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you.
Agreed. Mr. Hallward, anything on your end? Okay. All right, as I said, we're going to get another bite at this in a couple of weeks. We look forward to the next submission. Anything else on your end before we close?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right, thanks very much. Look forward to seeing you again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to congratulate Paul as well. Good luck with it, Paul. Yeah.
You can get a lot of that tonight, Paul. All right, let's go to 7B, CIP update and FY26 kickoff.
Sure.
Early. This is good. Early in the year.
That by design. So, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. I'm happy to set this one up before I turn it over to the city CIP coordinator. Oh, gosh, I need to pull it closer. So thank you. Is it working now? Oh.
Rain, I think.
I think that, all right. So I'll slow down a little bit. So thank you, Chair and members of the commission. I'll set this item up briefly before I turn it over to the city CIP coordinator, who's Caitlin Sobsey, and is here tonight. Also with us in the audience is Andy Young, city's deputy city manager. So this is really a two-part item. There was a late add to your agenda. And that was to make sure you all are aware of the latest on the city's fiscal policies moving forward. And I don't want to sort of steal the thunder on that storyline, so I'll reserve those updates for Ms. Sobsey. To set up your item tonight, as posted in the agenda, the request, this is a building tradition that staff comes to the Planning Commission early in development of the CIP. If you remember several years ago, the first time the Planning Commission would see the CIP is when it was already drafted, and the staff does a very thorough job of preparing the CIP. So it's a detailed look at all the projects as well as the financing for all those. So by the time you got the draft document, it was very difficult to have any input on that particular CIP because the puzzle pieces were already fit together. So the idea tonight is really to share with you staff's ideas around the key priorities and the themes for this year's CIP, and those are listed beginning there on line 24 of your staff report, around effective and realistic project delivery, infrastructure reinvestment, multimodal transportation, and affordable housing. Staff is, of course, looking for your feedback on those preliminary priorities. Any other thoughts you have as staff begins the work of preparing the CIP? Also included in the packet as an attachment is the quarterly update that staff prepares on a regular basis, showing you the progress that's being made in delivering the adopted CIP. That's included as an attachment. And then, as I mentioned, the other attachment that was a late add to your agenda was the council staff report at Monday's work session outlining proposed changes to the fiscal policies. With that, by way of setup, I'll turn it over to Caitlin Sobsey.
Thank you, Paul. How's mine? Good? Okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Caitlin Sobsey, CIP Coordinator, and I'm here tonight to officially kick off fiscal year 26 through 31 Capital Improvements Program development. The Planning Commission is also requested to receive the quarterly update, as Paul mentioned, on ongoing and active CIP projects. Staff is in the early stages of developing the fiscal year 26 CIP budget now, as Paul mentioned, in accordance with our former practice of coming to the Planning Commission early and seeking input on the priorities before the proposed CIP is presented to you all in early 2025. The input and guidance that we're looking for to staff is on long-range capital improvement needs and objectives, ensuring alignment with goals of the city's comprehensive planning, and promoting public interest and understanding of the plan. Going into this next 6-year budget cycle, staff has identified some initial priorities. Those are listed here. Number 1 is effective and realistic project delivery. Focusing on delivery of existing active projects in our CIP now, we have over 40, and those are all detailed in the CIP update. We talked a lot last year about aligning staff and resources for successful project delivery. We did receive 3 new positions to that effort. We've also implemented some internal process improvements and some new procedures to further that effort. But we're still focusing on evaluating all of our future project planning to ensure alignment with the strategic priorities of the council, staff capacity, and also ensure all projects have realistic and achievable scopes, schedules, and budgets. Last year, I talked a little bit with the Planning Commission about unclogging the CIP, as I called it. We've made a lot of really good progress toward that effort, but we're still focusing on that. The second priority is infrastructure reinvestment. Investing in existing capital assets across programs such as transportation, facilities, and utilities. Third is multimodal transportation, continue investing in multimodal transportation infrastructure that would make the city more walkable and bikeable. And the fourth is affordable housing, working on developing financial policies which would allow affordable housing funding and programming to be integrated into the annual CIP process, and to prioritize the development of a multi-year plan for the use of the Affordable Housing Fund. As Paul mentioned, the actual language was sent earlier in the financial policies staff report that's going to council on Monday, the 25th. It's already gone to work session earlier this week, and that actual language is long-range financial planning for affordable housing shall be done through Affordable Housing Fund and presented concurrently with the CIP. So that instructs staff to develop a long-range funding plan for affordable housing. It'll still be in the Affordable Housing Fund, which is operated in, which is adopted in the operating budget ordinance, but it'll be presented concurrently with the CIP and in a very, I'm hoping, a similar format. So last year, we talked about presenting a long-range funding plan for housing and also increasing visibility of that plan, and I feel like this delivers on both those fronts. So on page 2, there was a screen there.
It just went up. Like, we
Okay.
were talking, it just closed and just closed.
Okay,
and
good.
disappeared.
All right, I was just making sure. On page 2, we talk about the CIP quarterly update.
Just once. Just shut itself down and said, "Well, I'm done."
I've never seen that happen before. The CIP quarterly update for quarter 2 of fiscal year '25. Again, that's the active ongoing projects that we have. We have 42 active projects right now. 6 of those were completed in the second quarter of fiscal year '25. I apologize, I did not send the first quarter updates that we did in July to the Planning Commission, but the next time that we do those updates, we'll make sure that we include those updates in future reports to the Planning Commission. CIP changes that we're implementing in fiscal year '26, I'm excited to talk about this and introduce some changes that we're doing. As we have started development internally, we've made multiple changes to the process and presentation of the CIP. This year, the CIP budget book, the binders, will look different. We're working on sort of reorganizing some of the sections and some of the information that's presented in that, especially the project sheet. We have a new project sheet that we've just launched earlier this week. It has a new design. It will look very different. It also has some new content, some new components that we have included. Those include new sections that are added for project benefits, kind of the why, like in addition to the project description, what are the benefits to the community of those projects, and then project schedule and budget information, just to increase public transparency on how we are carrying out our previous and future CIP commitments. We also will have new sort of tables or presentation of the information for comprehensive planning alignment, and then the equity and sustainability alignment. The equity lens will look different this year. And we did not previously have a comp plan lens or checklist, but that's what we're adding this year. Again, just to try and improve readability, I think, of the CIP, and make it easier to understand, and also to connect the project, to support that project delivery and project development focus, and connecting projects back to the long-range goals and strategies of all the comp plan chapters, and to tell the story of how we are using the CIP to realize the city's goals and vision. We also have some new sections in the overview, and again, these changes are all intended to improve readability and organization, enhance project development, increase public transparency, and simplify and improve the data overall that's presented in the CIP budget. On the next section, we just have some background on the Planning Commission's role and the requirement for you to annually consider and recommend a 6-year CIP. The section after that, I'm not going to read all of that, but after that, we have the CIP budget and planning. That's just some CIP definitions and requirements that are also provided as helpful background. What is capital infrastructure? So I'll skip ahead to timing and schedule. We will be back to present the proposed fiscal year 26 CIP to the Planning Commission tentatively in February. We're still sort of working through the final schedule with finance to make sure that it aligns with the operating budget, because ultimately it'll be presented to City Council alongside the city manager's budget in March. March 24th, I think, is the date for that first presentation. So the tentative dates that we have scheduled for Planning Commission are February 19th for that work session when we first present the proposed CIP, and then March 5th will be the public hearing and recommendation. I think that's all for me. Yeah, I'm ready for questions, discussion.
Thank you very much. Again, work session items, so I'm not taking public comments here. And I think we'll just keep this kind of just informal and conversational. What kind of feedback are you looking for from the commission now? What would be most helpful?
I think feedback on the initial priorities that we've outlined that we're thinking of focusing on this year, and any other priorities that you all have in mind, or any other community needs that you feel should be considered in the process as we, work through the project sheets and as we get into development. Yeah.
I'll say I appreciated the status updates on existing projects. It was really, really helpful to see how all that hangs together. And last year, we talked a lot particularly about affordable housing and just some concern or confusion about how the city thinks about it in the context of the CIP. So I'm glad to see that's in here now. I think folks may have some comments on that as well. But let me just throw it open to others and see if we have any other questions, comments, concerns for staff.
I can go. Thank you, Ms. Sobsey. Nice to see you again. I think to your question about the priorities that you all have outlined, I think they're terrific. The way I read them, the effective and realistic project delivery, to me sounds like no new projects, right? Okay.
That's correct.
That's fine.
Limited new projects.
Limited new projects. I think we have built a lot of new stuff. We've done a lot of really big projects. And so I do think a focus on reinvesting in our infrastructure and continuing to build out multimodal transportation makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad to see the affordable housing, the sort of solution that you've come up with for affordable housing. I'll defer to my colleague, Mr. Hyra, and his thoughts on that, but that makes sense to me. On the infrastructure point, I went to the CACT meeting last week, and they have been having a lot of discussions about the city's paving problems, the fact that we're falling behind on paving, we're sort of putting Band-Aids that are then wearing off, and we're never really going to ever catch up at any point unless we put a lot of money into really repaving the whole city. I mean, I think you see that even out front City Hall right here, right, on Little Falls and Park Avenue. And so those are the kinds of investments that I would like to see us making. Like, let's make sure that the infrastructure that we have is well maintained. I think we heard that same message from Zach Bradley before he left.
Paving is one of the top of mind when we talk about the infrastructure reinvestment. It's something
And
we've talked about.
It's not sexy or flashy or
Right.
some cool new project, but it doesn't have to be. And I think the community will, I hope, will appreciate that the city is.
One likes potholes,
No one likes potholes. Yeah, I think that will be popular.
like city government 101.
And
No
same
potholes.
thing. And same thing with
Filled-
multimodal transportation. If you're, I mean, I'm seeing the new crosswalks and ramps all over the city. It's really terrific. Like, they're popping up everywhere. So yeah, it's very visible. And that, again, like, if we're gonna dedicate money to multimodal transportation, like, that will also be visible to the community, and it will actually have like positive benefits for people who need to walk and bike around. So I feel like you all are spot on. And maybe at some point in the near future we can do a flashy project, but for now I think there's a lot of kind of cleanup that we need to do on our infrastructure. I really was excited about the description of the changes that you have in mind for the document. Really great. I like the idea of tying it back to our comprehensive plan and small area plans to really describe how the CIP, our ideas in the CIP are really fulfilling that vision. I think that's terrific, and it'll help the community better understand this big kind of unwieldy document. So thank you for that. And I think that.
I do have to give a shout out. I did have a lot of help and input in the development of that new project sheet and that new process from the planning department. They helped me a lot. I think we're also, part of that is, our goal is to also increase understanding and awareness within the organization of the comprehensive plan chapters, because if you're not in planning, you may not be very familiar with those, but it's really important to, executing the CIP. That's kind of where it all originates from, right?
That's right. And I'm not surprised to hear that you had some really great support from our planning division. So thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Who's next? Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation and the first go at the update. I've got just a couple of comments, both on kind of current or near-term issues, and then a few thoughts on some future projects. On the current or near-term projects for rooftop solar, and I'm going to focus mostly on just energy, since I think my colleagues will do a much better job than anything I might have to say on housing or transportation. So there was a little discussion at the city council meeting the other night, talked about the Aurora House and the community center rooftop assessment. I was just wondering, who's doing that assessment? Is that a city thing, or have we hired a contractor for that?
I think that, I'll let Andy answer.
So the Aurora House, we're using a contractor that is facilitating that for us, that's doing a bunch of other improvements at the Aurora House right now. So I can't tell you, I couldn't tell you the engineering firm's name, but we're using it through TMG, who's doing the work for us down there. The community center, we haven't looked at yet.
Okay. On the Aurora House, is that something that's available, that assessment?
No, not yet. No, the feedback I got this morning is the improvements, the structural improvements that we need to make are pretty minor. So I think it's going to be doable.
That's encouraging.
But I haven't seen a report yet.
Yeah, that's encouraging, because when I look at the national scene, I get a little nervous about the Inflation Reduction Plan and those kind of benefits. And if we're not taking advantage of those opportunities soon, we may lose them. So I would encourage us to go ahead as soon as we can on that type of a project. And I always like to kind of raise the issue that even though we look at it as an expenditure, I almost kind of look at an investment in something like solar as the city's almost functioning like a green bank, because it's providing the upfront capital. But once that project is in, it will return the cost of the initial cost over time. So I think it's important to always point that out, that it's not quite the same as an investment in a sidewalk or something like that. I was just going to, since you have, since that's showing up right now, I like the wording that you had on the staff memo there under multimodal transportation. You know, we're doing certain things to make the city more walkable and bikeable. That's good. I would suggest something like that on the infrastructure reinvestment as well. Now, if we're making those investments, and for me, I'd like to see something that would indicate that we're pursuing where possible the goal of reducing emissions and achieving the government operations energy action plan implementation. I just like tying those investments to some type of a bigger overall goal. As far as the future projects, first of all, I like the format for how you're tracking the CIP projects, and I really encourage the staff to think about something like that on the energy action plans, to come up with some type of it's only a page and a half, I think, is all you take for purposes of tracking the CIP, and to do something similar with both the community and the government plan, to have that simple kind of, you know, and clear indication of where we are, and I think that would be probably mainly for city council's benefit. So, and several of the council members asked the other night, they said, let us know when there's an issue so that we can help, you know, clear the issue. So I think if we had a very crisp, you know, way to describe where we're at on all the different projects, sub-projects within the energy plans, that would make that easier to track. On the property yard design, I presume work is still underway on that. I would just encourage to have the property yard design include electric vehicle chargers for both the bus and for our fleet vehicles, and maybe even some for visitors. Just want to make sure that's included in that when the time comes to review that. There's a mention, I think it was on line 98 of the staff report, about a new grant application for the Cherry Hill Farmhouse, and that would address both the roof and the HVAC system. I strongly support that. I think that would be great. When we did the informal energy audit of the farmhouse, it was pretty clear that that appliance, the HVAC appliance, is very old. I'm guessing 40 years old, and it takes up a huge amount of space. So obviously, it's very inefficient. So yeah, I think we should go forward with that with as much gusto as we can. Is the Smart Cities grant, is that in a CIP project? Would you happen to know?
It is in the CIP. It's not on this dashboard, though.
Okay, well, that's something I would be interested in seeing a status report in the future. Have we considered bringing the school bus, the EV school bus issue into the CIP as a planning tool? As I think about it, I think it would avoid some of the purchasing decisions being made on an ad hoc basis. Right now, it just seems like, you know, the school board has to wait till whatever might be left over at the end of the year and then make an important decision on, you know, what type of a school bus. And we saw this past December, they decided to go with a diesel bus. And I think if we had something in a more methodical approach in the CIP, that it hopefully would minimize that type of a decision. I think there's also, I'm sorry Cindy is not here this evening, because I think there's also a legislative program tie-in in the sense that we're told from the school that the reason that they want to maintain some diesel buses is to be able to ride to distant schools. Well, they should have EV chargers for buses, and I think that's something the state could help out. It would help the overall energy situation, I think, if they were to do that. The last thing I had is just I want to make sure that we're pursuing an off-site solar project. It's called a power purchase agreement, and I'm hoping that we can see that as perhaps included within a CIP project. So those are a few things that I just wanted to bring up as future considerations.
Thank you. That was some good feedback. I'll take some of that back to staff and share with them as suggestions. Also, I wanted to just mention that for, I agree with you on the property yard, you know, master planning, but we do have in the CIP currently, we have the EV fleet and chargers grant. That's listed in the dashboard. I think it's in the facilities program, green vehicle fleet and charging stations that will install charging stations at the current property yard location. And it also purchased some EV and hybrid vehicles for operations. I know that the fleet management team with operations is working on the school buses. I've heard a lot of discussion about that. I think they're actively working different alternatives and options that we can provide to reduce the diesel, usage. Yeah.
It's very visible and obviously has important health ramifications, so
Right.
thank you.
Other commissioners? Feeling?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to really kind of look at it ahead of time, to help kind of guide the ship a little bit. Especially for things that aren't in here or even discussed yet, but are things that we've brought up from time to time. I do like the new format ideas that you're proposing. I think that is going to give it some transparency and a little bit more ease of understanding how it ties back to the comp plan. I think that's really important to draw that line very clearly, especially for somebody who's not familiar with the comp plan. So I appreciate that thoughtfulness and how you're approaching the new and improved layout of the report. There were a couple of questions that I did have. There were just a couple items on this list that I didn't know what they were, so they might be what I'm going to ask about. One is I didn't see anything with regards to the sanitary upgrades and studies that need to be done with our city, and I think that might tie into the GIS or the Geographic Information Systems mapping updating that I think our city really does need, especially as we're looking at these larger developments coming online. It would be really helpful to have all that data overlaid in a very quick way to distill information and realize, like, where do we really need to focus our efforts right away. And I think three-dimensionally, in terms of spatial planning vertically, but also into the ground, I think it's really important to understand what's there, what's aging, so that we can develop a plan of how we're going to either start the maintenance and upgrading of some aging infrastructure that's below ground, that isn't sexy at all, that nobody wants to talk about, but yet we've got these large redevelopment ideas and projects that we are in the crux of approving, that we may or may not have issues and be creating more issues with our existing infrastructure. So I think bringing that GIS map update into, or study of what things we need to start updating for the city, I think that should come into this plan. And I didn't see it here. I saw it in the city work plan as an item, that the city work plan, there's definitely a divide between what people understood about it. Maybe people just don't understand what GIS is and what it can do, which I think maybe some education on that will help, because I think it's really important. We're in a data-driven age, and to just quickly be able to distill all that information from layered maps will really help us plan further into the future without, and also orchestrate projects together that may seem disjunct in the CIP, and make sure that we're timing them to align with other development as it comes online. So it might mean reshuffling of priorities on a when we're looking at those, you can also model traffic patterns that will help with the bike plan. I mean, like, there's just so much information that can come in with taking a look at updating our GIS. So sanitary is on my list. The sidewalks master plan implementation projects and lighting. Did I see that in the transportation items? I don't.
Sidewalk master plan implementation.
Yeah. So just sidewalks through the city, right? Like, I think,
Yeah. We have in the summary, we have a bunch of little sidewalk and crosswalk projects that we've been actively working or completing in some cases. I'm not sure that the overall sidewalk implementation plan is, I have to think about that. Is that a CIP project? I guess.
I don't know. That's why
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, I think I think the things up here are kind of discrete, kind of
Yeah.
larger projects. The sidewalk money that's in the master plan is kind of doled out for kind of smaller efforts, and so that's probably why we haven't included it.
Okay.
'Cause
Many of those were,
It's under that threshold.
yeah, many of them were included in like the sidewalk memo that went to CACT where it listed all of the projects, like many of these projects are included in that. I think in this next budget development, we'll look at, as we're closing out these sidewalks, what are the next sidewalks as part of that implementation
Okay.
plan? I think when we report it in a dashboard setting like this, it
It doesn't really pop up. Yeah.
probably
because,
makes sense to track it as individual sidewalks.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty healthy balance of funds to be able to spend on sidewalks, and so the current approach is the team's going to take time between now and kind of through the winter to work the list, the priority list of sidewalks, missing sidewalks that we've gotten from the CACT.
Okay.
And then share with them in the spring which ones we're proposing to do.
Okay.
So each of those sidewalks are usually missing for a reason, right? And so they're all kind of hard in their different ways. And so the team's going to spend some time this winter to kind of creatively think through how we can address them.
Okay. Thank you. And then I noticed there weren't very many the project types, and maybe the community energy action plan projects, like anything that's coming out of those studies and those gateway thresholds that we're trying to meet. I'm assuming those would pop up under facilities or things like that. Okay.
Yes.
And then for parks, I noticed there's open space acquisition and funding for fiscal year 2026, quarter one list, but I didn't really see anything in here under parks. So I saw a few that are in progress, right? But I didn't know if there was like an acquisition plan that then feeds into this.
Open space acquisition is a hard one, because we include that as a project sheet in the CIP every year. We don't really have funding identified, but we want to leave an opening for ourselves to acquire properties if they come up,
Right.
and city council can do that, through their budget action. But no, it's not really tracked on this, because it's kind of not an active project.
Yeah, no, I get you.
I don't have a schedule for it, yeah.
And that was it?
I did want to say, there is one fiscal year '25 sewer project, which was the flow equalization basin to increase sewer capacity. That was in the fiscal year '25 CIP. It's not on this list yet, and it probably should be added under new projects that we're still initiating. There was only like $700,000 funded in fiscal year '25 for the initial designing and planning of that project. That's the only sewer project that I'm aware of in the CIP right now. There might be other sewer studies or planning that's being done in sort of our engineering and operating sections, but yeah.
But they're underneath that threshold of the 150 because there's still studies.
Yeah.
So there's an ongoing kind of active amount of work relining sewers in the city. I think we've
Right.
relined like 70% of them.
Yeah.
We've just initiated work to reline manholes in the Cedar Lane subshed, up Hillwood Avenue and kind of back that way. So related to some of our inflow and infiltration issues that we've talked kind of with council about previously. So we can double check on whether that kind of ought to show up here. It's a good question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm not going to tell you anything you haven't already heard, because I've been listening to your conversations with city council lately, but to belabor the obvious more on utilities, stormwater infrastructure, sewage, catch basins, whatever. What I hear them saying, or at least a couple of the members of council saying, is that they would like to have the same kind of granularity of information that we're getting on, pick any CIP project here that's on your list, in terms of, what's its scope, what's its status, what's the red, green, yellow condition of it. They actually want that kind of information manhole by manhole cover. I don't know if that's even feasible, much less necessary, but I think you've got to travel some distance from where we are now to, deal with that. So that. I just wanted to, for the record, say it. Never want to miss the opportunity to talk about the Betos, the Straits of Betos, whenever we're talking about capital projects. On the chart that we're looking at there now, its status is red. Has that been updated since we signed the agreement with them? Has there been some new holdup on the Straits of Betos?
It's not a new holdup. I think it's just impacts of the initial holdup. We did sign the agreement. After the agreement was signed, we actually had to re-engineer the easement that was granted in the agreement. Had to go back to engineering. I can't really share more details than that. I'm not.
Okay. That's good.
I'm not positive what it is, but it should be, advancing very shortly.
Yeah, I think we're imminent on it, and now, of course, we're getting to this time of year where some of this kind of work's a little more challenging, but
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. We're going to miss the window if we don't.
the easement that was ultimately agreed to was smaller, a little smaller, and so we've had to kind of go back and get some drawings adjusted, so we can tell the contractor exactly what they
Okay,
can do.
all right, well, you guys are on it, just want to make sure. In the same vein, the Gresham Light situation, I hear, people are still pounding on the table about that, as they did when I was on, and it really seems the bottom line is that, it's not going to get resolved until the Great Streets project goes through in 2027, and at some point, somebody just needs to tell the folks at Gresham that's the way life is, unless it's not. I mean, if there's some way that we can, the council members say, well, we could go to the other electeds at the jurisdiction, and, I mean, is that really a realistic scenario, or should we just say that, this is part of a bigger plan, the bigger plan's coming in 27, so that's the way it is.
The fiscal year 27 project is the North Washington,
right.
okay.
The whole
multi-mode
North
improvements,
Washington
yeah.
Greater Streets.
It is in that scope right now. I don't know the details. I would have to come back and provide an answer for what the details are on the current, if there are current plans to address it before then.
Well, at some point during our deliberation of this in spring, it would be nice to get for sure, here's our plan, and not have to keep talking about it until the plan is executed. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is if you can flip back, I'm sorry, my TV screen isn't working, so I'm having to look at my colleague's TV screen, is on the housing question. Last night or Monday night, council spoke to this, and what's on this document seems consistent, I think, with what I heard. I just jotted down some notes. The Planning Commission wants to incorporate affordable housing into the CIP. Okay, the manager expressed that, which is true. He said the city charter says the city can't own or operate affordable housing. Okay, well, we've heard that before too. Somehow we managed to deal with that through the participation of the EDA, but if we go bigger, I gather that that's not really probably an option, like a Virginia Village project. So he said we are going to do affordable housing separately from the CIP, but at the same time, which is interesting and okay, I guess, if that's what we all agree on as a strategy, because we do want to plan for affordable housing on a multi-year basis, he said. So I'm just bringing it up now because, again, time goes on, and it would be desirable when the affordable living policy comes out to marry that up to our desires on affordable housing, and during the process of approving this CIP you have before us to actually come out next July 1 with a strategy that we can all march behind. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go Mr. Hyer and Mr. Krasner.
Well, I just want to thank Caitlin for all your work, Andy as well. And I think Mr. Duncan just said it all because, I mean, this has been 3 years of me just getting upset when the CIP comes our way because I think that we should have affordable housing in
What you
it.
said last year.
What's that?
You can just replay what you said last year.
Yeah, I did it 3 years,
Yeah.
yeah, right. But this year, at least, there is some movement. I'm glad that the city is thinking about doing long-term planning on affordable housing in conjunction with the CIP. That seems to be the language. Just to update all the commissioners, and obviously Mr. Dunk just asked about it, but we just approved right before this meeting the affordable living policy. At least the Affordable Living Policy Group approved it, so it should be coming to all of the commissions in December and January. It should be coming to us in December for our look at and hopefully approval. In what has been approved so far is a recommendation to have the city council allocate more funds from the operating budget into the Affordable Housing Fund. So there will be money to play with and plan for doing increased affordable housing throughout the city. In the recommendations is also to leverage the EDA and have them potentially float bonds for affordable housing so that the city as an entity doesn't have to manage or control or even fund affordable housing to a large extent. We can do it through an agency that's associated with the city. So that's also in the affordable living policy. So I think we are making some improvements in our infrastructure and hopefully then in our funding to do some planning and then execute to a greater extent on affordable housing. So I'm happier, but still would like to see this eventually, maybe 3 years down the line, have this parallel programming be all folded into the CIP so that there's one document. We might have to change our city charter to do that, but we could. So progress is being made, and I hope it continues to get made on the affordable housing front. So thank you.
Thank you. Agreed. Mr. Krasner.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add from what my colleagues already added. Actually, Mr. Duncan stole my thunder on the Betos poll. It's been bugging me for like 10 years. So I know it's like been a work in progress, and it's amazing how much effort in City Hall has gone towards that one poll. But it seems like, yeah, at least the main impasse has been fixed. So maybe turn that from red to yellow. It'll make us feel better on the chart. Yellow's better than red. It scared me too when I saw that. I said, how could that be red? I heard it when they finally worked that out. That'll be great. That's like one of the worst polls of the many polls in sidewalks, which is that's not the reason I joined the planning commission, but since I've been on, it's like I feel like it's like part of the reason I joined is to get poles out of sidewalks, which we did on Oak Street, which was kind of cool on the Oak Street Bridge. And then there's the Betos one. I just got like a couple hundred more to go, and we'll get them all out of there. Lincoln, greening of Lincoln is going to fix that for part of Lincoln. I see that is on the list. Just also, I was heartened to see the Upper Lincoln stormwater, which was also something that was again, if I have a pet project, that was one of them too. And that one, finally, I see shovels in the ground. I think I asked you last year about that. Just within the last 2 weeks, they started digging up the street. I think they're doing utility work. The gas people, it's some gas contractor has been fiddling with the gas lines there before they can install that new stormwater infrastructure on that part. So again, 5 years after the 2019 floods of July 2019, that led to the stormwater task force, which led to the list of projects. Government works slow, but it does work. So but you have to be patient. So it took 5 years plus, but it's now going in. At least that little part that'll fix one small piece. It doesn't fix a lot of other things, but I just wanted to give the city credit for, again, it takes a lot of time and effort, but I found there is progress if you're patient enough and push for it. That's really it. Otherwise, like I said, I understand that we're not really introducing many new projects here, so I'll wait and see what comes out in the final, in the draft CIP. But otherwise, again, appreciate the early look and the hard work that you put in. Thanks.
Thank you. I think you'll see a lot of those stormwater task force projects start to go into construction in the next year, so a lot of those are progressing. I also will say on the Betos sidewalk, I think that's why it's good to track those that's part of the sidewalk implementation master plan thing. And I think that's why it's helpful to track those sidewalk projects sort of individually so that we can see like which ones are we having challenges and seeing, significant delays on, and which ones are easier to accomplish. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to quick follow-up, since we're talking about tracking projects, I understand that the latest iteration on the covered bike rack at City Hall is to place it out by the flagpoles. That looks like a good solution to me. I would encourage you to move ahead as quickly as possible on that. I think that will make it 7 years from when the site plan was approved. And there was a TDM as part of that as well. So I always kind of feel funny when we look at somebody who's coming in for a site plan application. So you got to have that TDM in 2 months, except if you're City Hall, I guess there's an exception. So anyway, I hope you put some energy behind that and that we get that bike shelter in. Thank you.
Thanks.
Use the bike shelter tonight, it sounds like. Commissioners have covered most of my comments too. I just want to thank you for the early look. It is really helpful to us to see this stuff early. And we are going to get another bite at this in the middle of February. So there's a long time between now and then. So I think you got some good reactions, comments from commissioners here tonight. Is there anything else you need from us this evening?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's it. If you think of anything else tonight, tomorrow, let me know. Drop us a note. And yeah, I really appreciate it. I took a lot of notes. I'll be re-listening, I'm sure, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Obsey.
Thanks.
Anything else, Paul, on that?
Not on that. I just want to say I think this is right in terms of sort of that connection between sort of staff and planning commission early, I think is very beneficial. It lets us know what you're looking for when we present the draft CIP. As you know, it's a big document with a lot of projects. And so having an early direction on what's the focus and the key interests of the planning commission, it's all important. What do you all want us to update you on is very helpful to have. So thank you.
Big improvements. I've been on the commission a long time. It's big, it's much better. So thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on to our last work session item 7C, Planning Division Calendar Year 2025 Work Program.
All right. Thank you, Chair and members of the commission. I want to, I'll set this one up and present it all in one. So this is a preview of, it's hard when I don't have the screen. I'm going to turn a little bit here. So if you may remember during your annual advance, because of course the Planning Commission is moving forward, not backward. As you may remember during the annual advance last year, there was a preview of what the calendar year work program looked like for the Planning Division. And this staff report is a repeat of that exercise. So this is a preview of what staff is thinking lies ahead in calendar year 2025. Calendar year programming is always a little interesting because it's bridging fiscal years, and so some of this is a little bit uncertain, but I think it's always helpful to have a plan, especially in relation to the announcements earlier tonight. I think this is an especially important document to provide certainty in terms of work program and having a sense of what is going to be delivered and what will the focus of the group be over the next several months. And of course, this is going to change, right? When there's new staff on board, when there's a new budget in place. So obviously, this is a flexible document. But for the next several months, I have a sense that this will sort of hold as the work of the group. One thing that was sort of mentioned is this idea of sort of planning together, right? It's not only planning together with the community, but also planning together with everyone else who's on the planning staff, right? I do a very small percentage of the work, and everyone else does a much larger percentage of the work. But then also all the partner organizations we're working with, whether that's other departments inside the city or management within the city. And so very sort of purposefully, this staff report was signed off on by all of the team leads within the planning division. Of course, Gary, who's going to step in an acting planning director role moving forward. Carrie Odinino, who leads up transportation planning for the city. Emily Bazemore is leading long-range planning. Jack Trainer, who's leading our zoning updates, as well as being the steadfast clerk of the Planning Commission. And then Current Lawrence, who's leading environmental sustainability planning. And so I did want to acknowledge that this was a group effort to prepare this document, as well as all the underlying work that has to get done. As I said, this is a preview, but obviously feedback is welcome as these are being drafted and the staff is proceeding to work on them. By way of background, beginning on line 12, there are 5 different programs within the planning division: current planning, future planning, transportation, environmental planning, and zoning updates. The work plan itself is structured around not only those work programs, but also time. I think one thing that maybe goes sort of under-celebrated in work programs is the routine work that has to happen every day. For us, our routine work's a little bit different, but obviously the routine work of the city is what people come to expect. There was a mention about there shouldn't be any potholes. That doesn't go on anybody's work plan unless it's a real problem, but it is something people expect to have happen, right? They expect the leaves to get picked up. They expect the trash to get picked up. And so carving out space in any work plan for the routine work and recognizing that as an important part is important. And then otherwise, we tried to break it out by time. So by their nature, these projects and programs tend to take a while, so we broke it up into 6-month chunks, first half of the year, second half of the year, and then we always want to leave room for stretch goals, and so we did, as usual, we included a role for other things we might do if resources become available. This was not, as I mentioned, this wasn't developed alone. Beginning on line 29, this work plan was developed with several different inputs. We had inputs from the planning staff, the folks who are actually doing the work and keeping up with their certification, maintenance, and professional development, working with our related staff divisions and departments inside and outside of CPEDS. We had help from Public Works, we had help from Housing, and of course we had help from the manager's office as well. We used that 2-year work plan and department initiatives documents. We had the council's 5 strategic priorities, and then, of course, we regularly engage with boards and commissions. As a group, the planners are interacting with 7, 8 boards and commissions on a regular basis. Line 38, I'm going to step through this, but I'm only going to signpost what this is without going through all the tables. We held an internal workshop on October 30th. The slides from that workshop were attached. There's some nice summary documents about what is the organizational chart for the planning division, as well as what's the work that's been getting done in each of these planning programs over the last several years, as well as what's ongoing and coming up. There was an exercise where everyone was invited to suggest 3 different projects that would be important for the city to undertake in the next calendar year. Planners had 1 set of stickies, it was blue. The partners had a different color sticky, those were green, and you can see the tabulation of how many people suggested different kinds of ideas. So these were all people independently brainstorming, and then we collected the counts at the end. They're organized there by planning program. And then there's a table that begins on line 63. And then this is the culmination of that work. We did do an unusual thing, and we sized the paper to 11 by 17 because it made it easier to read when it's printed, but it makes it hard to display on the screen, and I apologize for that. But again, as I said, it's laid out with planning programs going across the page, time going down the page, and making sure to carve out room for that routine work that's so important to sort of what we do day in, day out. And then this is the summary of what planning expects to tackle in the next 12 months. And then we'll probably go back to that chart for discussion, but what I'll do is wrap up the report by going to the timing section on line 69 and say that this is really, we're sort of in the early middle stage of this conversation, having the Planning Commission discussion here tonight in late November. We'll get budget guidance from council about what's important to them in early December, and then your annual advance in January, and then we'll prepare our materials for budget submittal, and the formal adoption of the budget in April or May of next year is what would solidify that work plan, the second half of that work plan anyway. I'll leave that as the setup, and then maybe what we'll do is go back to the chart. And then I'll turn it back to the commission for questions and improvements.
Thank you very much. So it is a work session item, so you're looking for just reactions, advice, and perspectives on.
Yeah, so this is, so Emily Bazemore, credit to her, one of the things she always says when we're going out and doing a plan is that we want to be planning with the community, not for the community. And so really, this is, at this point, this is what staff thinks is important, but we want to know whether you all, as representatives of the community, think this is important. Have we hit the mark? Are there other things we should be thinking about? And so that's really the sort of feedback. Are there things that you wish were on this list? Are you happy with the things that are on this list? So that's really the sort of questions for discussion.
I appreciate the org chart, and I thought the table with the blue and green, the differences between them was very interesting, between the planners and everybody else. So, good. Same. We'll just throw it open for the commissioners for any questions, comments, reactions.
I have a few questions. I noticed that there were no routine work items listed for the future planning group. What's happening to the community profile, and the 5-year outlook, and the housing report, those kinds of things that you have been producing for us that I find very useful and valuable, and I think are useful for the community and also from an economic development standpoint for people outside of the community to know what's going on in Falls Church. I would like to see that as those products continued. I know we're working on the public utilities chapter, but I was trying to remember, I saw that there was an idea to update the vision and community character chapters. We last did vision in 2018, is that right?
2017 was the action.
2017?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm just still, I'm thinking there are other chapters that are even, they're still from 2005. So can you talk me through why that one was selected? Because I don't think that was even on the list when we had that kind of review of what needed to be updated in the comp plan. And we had kind of ranked.
Yep. Yeah, so it's common within any election cycle to sort of, as we sort of, one of the important inputs is the candidate statements about sort of, because that's in a sense not only what does the majority of the community think about, but what also maybe sort of the non-majority of the community think about sort of the future of the city, and largely what planning is trying to do is have a conversation about the future and make sure that there is a future that's inclusive and sort of advances the community as a group. So that's one thing we look at, and we did see a lot of maybe sort of discomfort or uncertainty about the future of the city. What we also saw, and this occurred before we last updated the vision chapters, that there was maybe a drift between what were the goals and the most important things that were documented in the comp plan versus what was going into the council's strategic priorities documents. Mm-hmm. And so when those things start to drift, that's a sign that maybe sort of the adopted policies are becoming a little bit stale. And I think also, the last time we updated the vision chapter, I think there was some expectation that we were going to get into community character and urban design, and we didn't pick up on those topics. And I know that's also a conversation about the amount of development that's happening within the community and the size and the scale and what it looks like. And so I think this is an opportunity to have that conversation again, make sure that the city's long-range planning documents are in alignment with where the community as a whole wants to go. And make sure that those planning documents are also incorporating sort of the short-term priorities that council has for the future of the community.
Okay, that's helpful.
Mhm.
Thank you. Let's see. Another thing that had been on the previous work plan, I think for 2024, for the July to December, was transportation planning, e-bike, scooter, golf cart regulations. So I see that is not reflected here. Is that just something that we've sort of deprioritized, or it's been replaced by other work?
That got sort of assumed into the SEEP. And so we didn't, the SEEP actually has a range of projects that it's supposed to deliver. And so that's something we've, I think, falls under that SEEP umbrella. It also includes things like the low-speed electric vehicles, things like golf carts, as well as sort of the e-scooters and the e-bikes.
So, but do we need to define regulations for those kinds of mobility devices? I'm a little confused. Like, what was the...
So some of them are already allowed under state code.
Right.
And so I think part of this is just doing a scan of what actually are people already allowed to do under state code. Do folks within the city know that those options are available? So some of it is awareness for city residents about the options available to them. Some of it is also internal awareness about, when we're designing streets, what do we need to be doing to accommodate that, as well as sort of the police and sheriff. Are they familiar with sort of maybe the increased use of these things throughout the city, and what would that mean for them?
Okay. Okay. Another thing that was not reflected in the transportation planning list was the parking requirements. I think we had thought we might tackle both commercial parking requirements and residential parking requirements, and I don't see that on the list.
Yeah, so residential parking, if you may remember, years ago, the city had won a technical assistance grant from COG to pursue an update not only to the residential parking standards, but also maybe a more important piece of it is that because the parking standards can be adjusted through TDMs, but also trip generation counts, right? So what we're seeing is that when each application comes in, there's some projection of added vehicle trips onto the nearby streets. But what our actual data is showing us is that over time, the actual vehicle counts are declining. And so getting a sense from a professional study about what's going on with actual trips in and out of these sites, and how does that relate to what we're seeing in the application materials. Sort of most notably, I know often there's hesitancy on the part of applicants to assume what's called a pass-by trip reduction or a multimodal trip reduction of anything more than 5, 10, or even 15% looks like a big number to them. But our non-single occupancy vehicle sort of trip rates in the city are all well above that number. And so people are even unwilling to sort of claim what's already happening, even in the absence of TDM plans many times. So that was there. We lost it as a result of the COVID shutdown, and it's still something we've been pursuing, but we haven't been successful in getting it again. So I think that's probably something that would go under one of those stretch goals.
Okay. Yeah, I think parking would be something that I would personally like for us to tackle. I feel like it keeps appearing, and I'd just like to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, what we did include was this idea of both looking up, sort of re-looking at commercial uses as well as the parking requirements specifically for those commercial uses. We're finding a lot of jurisdictions are looking those at again and finding that what they had on the books was much higher than what they needed in
Yeah,
in
I mean, I think
practice.
that's the case for residential too. So it's kind of hard to separate them when we're talking about 5/1s, right? Where you have both kinds of uses in the building. Okay, well, one vote for parking. And then I guess the only other thing I wanted to ask about was also in the long-range planning category, the green building standards was something that we had discussed taking a look at. I would very much love to do that. And I totally recognize that this is going to be a period of transition for the team, and so I'm not trying to pack things in there. I just don't want to lose sight of them, and I'd like to keep them on the radar, even if we aren't able to tackle them this year.
Yeah, I know Kurt had produced that white paper looking at sort of what are the elements we ought to be considering, but obviously other jurisdictions have taken that a step further. I think one thing to incorporate might be, right, we had that speaker event on biophilic design. And so things like finding ways to incorporate things like that into our design standards could be helpful. So we can include that as well.
Thank you.
Just one quick overall comment. I'm just wondering if you had any discussion on whether or not you have sufficient staff resources to do all these things?
So that's why some of the things fell off the list. And so I think in some cases it'll be sort of replacing the things on the list, the things that are being talked about tonight. And in other cases, it'll be putting them under the sort of stretch goals and hoping to find technical assistance. Some of these also require sort of specialized sort of knowledge that oftentimes we have in-house, sometimes we have to go out-of-house to find it.
Right. I just hope there's, transparency on that issue. People speak up if, rather than put things on a page and know that we can't get there.
That's why we have used that stretch goal role to try and communicate that bubble, that it's stuff people want, but we can't do with what we've got available now.
Okay. Other comments? Anything? Okay. Ms. Freelander?
So I think some of my comments about the GIS mapping probably were misplaced. They need to kind of be part of this conversation, since they would, that would be more of a study, right? To kind of determine what we need to update. And maybe that could be in this future work or in the future planning portion, because I think that's going to help us dictate to some other, might identify some other issues that we need to be addressing in the future plans.
Yeah, I think a lot of places call it their digital twin, but it's a model of sort of how the city is actually operating and what are the assets and the resources within it. And that is something that has been sort of slowly falling out of date. We can see it. It was actually the commission, it was a commissioner member who flagged it when we were doing the East End small area plan, and our building layer was far enough behind that the BJ's Wholesale was still shown as the plumbing supply company. Right, and that BJ's went up before I started working here. So the building layer is behind, but that's only sort of one piece of it, right? It's common for those kinds of things to fall out of date, but I think having up-to-date information on city infrastructure, buildings, I think those are important pieces.
Okay. All right. That good feedback for you?
I think that's very helpful, yes. I think it's good to hear that, the added projects are obviously important to the city, and we'll get those noted somewhere in the chart in some fashion, recognizing staff limitations. And then, some of these things also feed into budget requests, right? If what we really think is important for the community is a digital twin, then let's flag that. Let's try to get a cost estimate of that before we put in our budget. And then, so I think that's all helpful. And the fact that not a lot of things fell off gives me hope that we're sort of moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, information items. Do we have any planning commissioner reports this evening?
I have one. Mr. Stevens and I actually both attended a Zoom session on form-based codes and affordable housing. It was a webinar.
Yep.
Put on by, who was it? Was it Smart Growth?
That was Coalition for Smarter Growth.
Coalition for Smarter Growth, yeah. So it was Matt Bell, who's a professor of architecture at University of Maryland. CNU, that's right, yeah. And the Takara Nicole Thomas with Smart Growth America. and they talked about form-based codes and how it can help lead to affordable housing. And there was one slide that I just wanted to talk through that summarized kind of like the pros and cons. I thought that was helpful from his list. And so some of the pros are that they are prescriptive, but cons are also that they are prescriptive. They provide like a minimum level of quality, but they also provide some clarity up front for developers about what they can do and what you can expect, and they help developers manage risk, so they're not coming into a project like with uncertainty as to whether or not it would be approved. Because things are sort of like decided up front in terms of the code and sort of the design that the city wants to see for the buildings, there's a more efficient approval process, and it can be site-specific. And then, so some of the cons were you can kind of end up with some projects that are sort of a more average quality architecturally or design-wise, and then any sort of modification of the code can be a really lengthy process, and it's also a lengthy process to create it in the first place. But it was really interesting. They talked about how form-based codes can help you protect your main street and your small businesses. The idea is that they are more like a cookbook, I think was what Ms. Thomas said. Form-based code is like, she likes to think of it as a cookbook, and sort of the difference between form and design is more like a seasoning. I thought that was clever. So anyway, it was a good session, and it's recorded. I'm happy to share the link if anybody's interested.
Thank you. Other reports?
Yeah, there's another, I guess this is my week for webinars or Zoom calls. It's one that I attended, and it so happened the mayor was on it, and I think Kurt Lawrence was on it as well. It was an interesting proposal that actually, Mr. Stoddard, you're going to find when you go over to Alexandria, because they are currently involved in a pilot program for this. And what it is it's a way to provide charging on the street, on the right-of-way, out in the public street. And rather than have the utility do it, the homeowner who's in front of the space actually makes the connection. And they're allowed to keep a percentage of the revenues, which gives them kind of an entrepreneurial attraction to doing this. So it may be possible that something that after Alexandria is finished with their pilot and we kind of have a chance to learn from them that we can, that we can implement here. So we'll be calling you, Paul, to see how the pilot is going. Thanks.
Indeed. Anything else? All right, let's move on to the final director's report.
All right, thank you. So as always, I never want the commission to be surprised, so I'll start with the look ahead. Your next regular meeting is in 2 weeks from today, December 4th. You'll have 3 items on your agenda. It's a review of the love sculpture that's been proposed. This is the Virginia Love Sculpture, the 4 letters LOVE, as proposed to be laid out in the front grounds of City Hall. And that, of course, falls under your charter authorities around review of public art. Then you'll have a review of your draft annual report to City Council. This is a regular publication you all make documenting the work that you've been doing, as well as your recommendations to council about the biggest challenges the community ought to take on next, or the most important ones, or the most pressing ones, somewhere in that range. And then also a work session on naming of the parklets. So the city recently installed new parklets along the South Washington corridor. Public facilities can be named to honor events, individuals, the history of the area, and so that'll come before you as a work session item.
I believe accessory dwellings is also, the work session is also being moved up.
Great,
to the
okay.
4th.
And then also, thank you, Mr. Trainer. Accessory dwellings, and that's assuming, really that's sort of a placeholder that draft code is up for consideration of first reading and formal referral next Monday. And if that is formally referred out by council, then that same material would be shared with you in your December 4th packet.
And then not on December 18th?
Not on December 18th, correct. That would leave room on December 18th for Yesenia Jeweler to come back to you, which you all had deferred to that date. Final work session on the bike plan. By that point, I expect we'll have comments back from VDOT, which they've been reviewing under their state code authorities. And then we wanted to make sure that you all had an action on your annual schedule of meetings before the close of the year, because, of course, we are recommending a special meeting in January to accommodate for the holidays and the work that needs to be done. After that, you'd be into the new year, where you would have a combination of regular work items on January 15th, and then our recommendation is to hold a special session to handle your administrative items on January 22nd. But that's the look ahead. Are there any questions on that?
Questions?
I think the affordable living policy also is coming on the 18th, December 18th.
Ah, okay. And there we go. So the affordable living policy is scheduled to go to council, their second December meeting. Their May 2nd meeting is their joint session with school board to talk budget, and council is scheduled to take up the affordable living policy on December 9th. And then we would want to share those same materials with the Planning Commission that same month, December 18th. And that is partly the motivation for bringing accessory dwellings up, that those materials would be ready for your review on December 4th, and that opens a slot on the 18th for the affordable living policy.
Questions? Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to item 8C. Do you have correspondence?
If I could, there was one item in the written director's report, and I actually might turn this one over to Mr. Trainer to present.
It's the annual service survey. It's your chance to let us know how we're doing, what we can do better. That is included as the lone attachment in the director's report. And I think we're requesting those returned by the December 18th meeting so that we can incorporate those answers in the January 15th meeting packet. So I'll send out a reminder in early December if we haven't received everyone's responses yet, but appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
So homework for the commissioners to fill out the survey by the 18th of December.
Please.
And just to say, this is what helps the planning shop be a high-performing organization, is this regular feedback that you all provide us on an annual basis about how we're doing in providing our support to you, and whether the materials we're providing are what you all need to do your work. And we'll present the results of that at your annual advance.
Okay. Any more correspondence? Nope. Okay. Again, just before we gavel, one final thank you to you, Mr. Stoddard. Thank you, Gary, for looking forward to working with you in the future here. As I said, you've left the city a better place. So just thank you for everything. So with that, we are adjourned.
Mr. Chair,
sorry.
it doesn't have to be part of the official meeting, but since Mr. Stevens and I regularly attend the meetings of the Economic Development Authority chaired by Bob Young, I thought it appropriate to note Mr. Young's death on Monday after a illness with cancer. He was active on the EDA even up until their last meeting when he called in from the hospital, and know that a lot of remembrances and observances of his contributions to the city will occur over the next couple of weeks, so perhaps we might touch upon that ourselves at our December meeting. Thanks.